While she is perhaps best known for her artwork for the card game Magic the Gathering, Therese Nielsen produced a number of Star Wars works as well. While she was originally contracted to create the cover art for Michael Jan Friedman's Nightfall trilogy, when those books were canceled, she went on to create the covers for Greg Key's 3 New Jedi Order novels. Her works layer different mediums, oils and acrylic, colored pencils, and airbrushed paint, and feature deep, vibrant colors. The Final Prophecy made it to number 13 on the New York Times paperback bestseller list for the week of October 19th, 2003. I'm pretty sure that I read The Final Prophecy the first go-around, but I remembered very little of it. In particular, I had no memory at all of Wedge and Jaina's plotline. So, a brief summary. The troubles for the living planet Zonama Sekot have just begun. When the Yuuzhan Vong scientist Nen Yim is given a captive ship to uncover the planet's secrets, what she finds shocks her to the core. Meanwhile, during an attempt to retake the Bilbringi system, General Wedge Antilles and his fleet are stranded deep in Yuuzhan Vong space. The Final Prophecy features 2 main plot lines, one which I found engrossing and one which I found probably necessary for future plot developments in the Unifying Force, but not as interesting to read. The first involves the Shaper Nen Yim's interest in the living planet Zonama Sekot, as well as Nom Anor as the prophet of the Shamed One's heresy, making a prophecy that the Shamed Ones and the Jedi together would walk on a planet that would be the Yuuzhan Vong's salvation. Both Nen Yim and Nom Anor want passage to Zonama Sekot, and the Galactic Alliance dispatches Tahiri and Corran to pick them up on Coruscant and take them there. The priest of the deception goddess Harrar tags along, and so their plotline involves them traveling to Zonama Sekot, crashing on Zonama Sekot, and then the discoveries that they find there. Meanwhile, in the other plot line, we have the Galactic Alliance beginning to make a push to recapture core worlds that they had lost in previous books. As the book opens, we see Wedge Antilles and his forces attacking the Yuuzhan Vong on Duro, but that's a ploy so that actually the other forces can retake the shipyards at Fondor. Of course, those shipyards aren't going to be much use to them yet because it will take a while to get them up and running. So the Galactic Alliance decides that they want to retake Bilbringi as well because there seems to be intelligence that those shipyards may be a bit more functional. Wedge's fleet heads to Bilbringi, and the 2 other fleets, Admiral Palayan's forces and Admiral Crayface's forces, are waiting for word from Wedge to come and ambush the Yuuzhan Vong. Except the problem is that the Yuuzhan Vong have taken out all the HoloNet transmissions, and so no one can talk to anyone, and Wedge is stuck. Han Solo and Leia Organa end up being dispatched as couriers to get communication working again, and meanwhile, over during the fiasco at Bilbringi, Jaina Solo wanders into a trap involving pirates. So first, let's get my lesser interesting, lesser favorite plotline out of the way. I like seeing Wedge, commanding forces and doing it so well, but for a lot of it, this just didn't feel important or interesting. It felt like there was a box they needed to tick that this is a Star Wars book and we need a space naval battle and here you go. And it obviously could be devastating for Wedge and Jaina, except for the fact that I know there's one more book coming, so I don't think that anything really bad is going to happen to them here, because we still have the unifying force to go. And then the Yuuzhan Vong taking out all the HoloNet transmitters is really interesting and a really good idea, because so much of what the Galactic Alliance and our heroes do comes down to communication from very long distances, from the capital on Mon Calamari and where all the different forces are located. But then it also made me wonder why it was so important in the previous book, in Force Heretic Reunion, for Han and Leia to rush off to Esfandia and get that station back up and running, if one book later the Yuuzhan Vong were just going to take out all communications again in a completely different way. At least this way is interesting and innovative, that the Yuuzhan Vong are using Dovin basils to collapse the HoloNet transmitters instead of just like an outright attack. But it really made me wonder why we needed to have 2 books in a row that involve attacks on the Galactic Alliance's communications. Especially because now in retrospect, it seemed like the only reason that Esfandia needed to be up and running so was that they could hear from Luke and company on Zonama Sekot and find out its coordinates so that Tahiri and Corran can go there in this book. But then communications are just down again for, plot reasons. Jaina too, I sometimes wonder if the authors don't quite know what to do with Jaina. So we have Jaina captured by pirates, and the rest of her squadron is captured by pirates, and then she has to use her force skills and her cunning to think her way out of the situation, which is fine. It just seems like stuff like that happens to Jaina a lot, and it's not an opportunity for her to show her flying skills, which she's perhaps best at, but her scheming skills, which Jaina still honestly has to work on at this point. But fortunately, the other plot line more than made up for the Bilbringi attack shortcomings. If I liked Tahiri's plotline in the Force Heretics books, but I wasn't sure in the end how the unification of Tahiri and Rena actually worked, and like how much she felt like the Tahiri she was and the Tahiri she's going to be. Tahiri in the final prophecy came together a lot better for me. Her Yuuzhan Vong memories come naturally to her, but at the same time, she has this Jedi training, and she's trying to balance the more aggressive, prone to anger Yuuzhan Vong side with her Jedi side. But at the same time, she still does feel like a teenage girl who's struggling, who's been thrown in the deep end here and not given a lot of support, and is trying to figure things out a lot of the times on her own. As the book opens, we see Tahiri on Dagobah. She's returning to Dagobah, a place she visited with Anakin in the Junior Jedi Knights books, because she wants to visit the cave on Dagobah and see what it shows her. She can't forget the vision that Anakin had of her being both Yuuzhan Vong and a dark Jedi, and she wants to figure out if by merging Rena and Tahiri's personalities, she's sidestepped that possible future, or if she's made it more likely. But when she's there on Dagobah, she runs into Shamed Ones who are a part of the Jedi heresy. Nom Anor has given his prophecy, and they are looking for that world where the Shamed Ones and the Jedi would walk together. They think it's Dagobah because Dagobah has a lot of history with the Jedi, with both Luke and Anakin Solo. But Tahiri knows, no, that's not the right place. And she knows that there's somewhere else she needs to be and something else she needs to be doing. She goes back to Mon Calamari with Han and Leia, where she learns that the prophet of the Jedi heresy has reached out to the Galactic Alliance wanting passage to Zonama Sekot. And Kenneth Hamner dispatches Tahiri and Corran to Coruscant to pick up the prophet and take him where he wants to go. At first I wondered why Corran, but it is true that in Edge of Victory Rebirth, Keyes paired Corran up with Anakin and Tahiri, and so I think he likes Corran's character and likes sort of pairing a mature but rather grumbly Jedi with a teen who is perhaps overeager at times, and so that they will balance each other out. But Corran being Corran, he doesn't trust Tahiri, I mean, honestly, this is Corran. He really doesn't trust anyone. So a lot of their interactions are Tahiri asking Corran, what do I have to do so you can trust me? And Corran being like, "Arr." And I do like the development that happened later on where Tahiri asked him to be her master, to take over her training, and why hasn't he done it previously? And I think that's a really interesting development because Corran hasn't really trained anyone at this point. Corran, even once he fully becomes a Jedi, is much more of a loner than a lot of the other Jedi, and I think being able to teach someone who's younger would do a lot for Corran. He can pass on his skills, but he can also get different, fresh perspectives. But of course, Corran and Tahiri don't go to Zonama Sekot with just Nom Anor. They also bring along Nen Yim, now a master shaper, and Harrar, the priest. There's a very interesting dynamic in play between all of them because Corran and Tahiri don't really trust the Vong, but the Vong don't trust each other. Yet, as they spend more time on Zonama Sekot, Nen Yim learns more about the planet, Harrar learns more about the planet. We start to see connections being formed between the Jedi and between the Vong, which is what I liked so much about Edge of Victory Conquest, that the Yuuzhan Vong were becoming sympathetic characters, that while their worldview is absolutely incorrect, and they were doing horrible things, the reasoning behind why they did those things was understandable and, yeah, sympathetic at times. Nen Yim in particular is a very strong character. At her core, Nen Yim just wants to save the Yuuzhan Vong, and at this point she thinks that if they keep going down the path they're going of endless war, they're not going to be saved, and that Zonama Sekot holds the key to stopping the fighting and bringing them together. Nen Yim's a heretic, but a very different kind of heretic than the Jedi heretics. The Jedi heretics have almost replaced the Yuuzhan Vong gods with the Jedi, so instead of their gods, they revere the Jedi to a not good extent, too much, too strong. The Jedi are not gods, they're fallible. Nen Yim, on the other hand, doesn't think the gods exist, and she thinks that a lot of the things they've been told are lies to cover up things in the Yuuzhan Vong's past that their culture does not want to address. She comes to Zonama Sekot thinking that it might be a threat that she has to eliminate, but realizing that that's not the case, that Zonama Sekot has this deep connection somehow to the Yuuzhan Vong, and that understanding that connection is key. Harrar as well also realizes that Zonama Sekot is very important, but his aims always feel a bit more political than Nen Yim's. Nen Yim is focused on saving her people, and Harrar is more focused on, yes, ending all this bloodshed to an extent, but also perhaps removing Shimra from power because there seems to be a faction that supported the previous Supreme Overlord instead. This is one bit that I wish had appeared in previous books, because I think, like the Jedi Heresy, this should have been something that was built on, that within the Yuuzhan Vong there is a growingly prominent group that do not side with Shimra, do not like the approach he's taken, view him invading this galaxy as a mistake and that they should have never done that. But instead, it's something that's really thrown on us here, and with one book to go after the final prophecy, that's not a lot to build on. But even Harrar, who back in the Agents of Chaos duology was trying to mass murder Jedi, has come to respect them more and listen to them more and even help them in the end. But of course, the wrench in all this, ruining these happy vibes between everyone, is, yes, Nom Anor. Nom Anor, that conniving little weasel. In the Force Heretic trilogy, Nom Anor became the prophet of the shamed ones. He really raised his prominence, was growing this, I guess, rival religion to the Yuuzhan Vongs. But by the end of Force Heretic Reunion, he was not doing well. He'd lost his insider into Shimra's court. He had an assassination attempt. People are trying to turn against him. So he comes out with this prophecy, which is not a prophecy at all. It's just based on information that he'd gathered. And when he arrives on Zonama Sekot, instead of seeing how important it is and how it seems to be connected to the Yuuzhan Vong, he just sees how much Shimra wants Zonama Sekot destroyed and taken out of the picture. And so he immediately turns on the other two, betrays the planet's location to Shimra, murders Nen Yim, which was an absolute shock. I did not remember that at all. She's such a prominent figure, and for her to die so suddenly and so abruptly was very shocking to me. Throws Harrar off a cliff, but we don't see his death, so he'll probably come back. And heading back to Yuuzhan Tar to weasel his way back into Shimra's graces again. I was a little disappointed that Nom Anor just gave up so soon. I mean, he could have led the revolution of the Shamed Ones and come to power. But I think at his heart, Nom Anor is a coward. It's why he won't face people in one-to-one combat. It's why he always runs away. Nom Anor has great plans and great ambitions, but when push comes to shove, he doesn't want to do the hard work to achieve them, and he'd rather take the easy way out. And betrayed Zonama Sekot and Nen Yim and Harrar and Tahiri and Corran is him taking the easy way out here, just weaseling off again like he always does. So honestly, my biggest issue with the final prophecy was just, it's really small. The scenes with Tahiri and Corran and the Vong in particular could have been even further fleshed out. I would have loved to see more with them, more happening, because as it stands, part 1 is just Nom Anor making his prophecy, Nen Yim finding things and contacting Harrar, and Tahiri and Corran being told that they need to go to Coruscant to pick up the prophet. Part 2 is them getting to Coruscant, getting to the meeting place, breaking Nen Yim out of the Shaper compound, and then taking off for Zonama Sekot with Yuuzhan Vong ships in pursuit. And then part 3, which true is like half the book, it's bigger than parts 1 and 2 combined, but I would have liked even more. And I think part of that does come down to the fact that the attack on Bilbringi just felt like having an attack because we needed to have an attack and we need to set stuff up for the last book. Every time we returned to that, I just didn't find it as interesting as the other plotline that was happening. And I found it very interesting that in the audiobook, which of course is abridged, they completely cut out anything to do with the attack on Bilbringi, and it is solely focused on the Jedi and the Yuuzhan Vong. So I don't know, maybe the final prophecy could have been 2 books. Maybe we could have stolen a book from the Force Heretic trilogy, made that a duology, and then fleshed this out further. Although I will say that it seems like Greg Keyes likes writing short, fast-paced books because both Conquest and Rebirth were right around 300 pages, which is really short for the new Jedi Order series. So, in short, the final prophecy is a little uneven in that we have an amazing plot line with the Jedi and the Yuuzhan Vong, but then a more tedious one with Wedge's forces and Jaina. And I'm not sure if that was because I was so engrossed in the Zonama Sekot plotline that anytime we cut away to the Bilbringi attack, I just desperately wanted to return to Zonama Sekot. But I do appreciate how real Greg Keyes' Yuuzhan Vong characters feel, because there's a tendency in the new Jedi Order to just make them two-dimensional villains and nothing more. So next time, I am going to be reading the final hardcover release in the new Jedi Order series, The Unifying Force by James Luceno.